Hello and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 30th of August 2025. As viewers of the podcast on YouTube may see, Sarah is sadly still not with us this week. She is feeling a little bit unwell and unable to take part this week, which is why I am very glad to be once again joined by my colleague and dear friend, Laura Perrins, who is very graciously and at the last minute and at some inconvenience to herself agreed to step in and help us out. And I really appreciate that. How are you, Laura?
I'm good, thank you.
We have a few things to talk about this week. I want to talk briefly about an article in the Sunday Independent last Sunday. I want to talk about a controversy around Dr. Umar Al Qadri. I want to talk about CSO figures on immigration. I want to talk about this debate in the UK about the European Convention on Human Rights. And then obviously we've had college places being announced this week. So there's been quite a lot to get through. But I have to say, the absolute highlight of my week, the pinnacle of my week, I don't know about you, Laura, was Sunday morning. For when, amongst other reasons, I opened an article in the Sunday Independent and I read the following words, which I'm going to read to the listeners. It says, "We are deeply, unhealthily attached to one man. We forgive all frustrations or misgivings because we believe he loves us unconditionally. Such unwavering fidelity means we're hurtling towards what may be the most devastating, crushing, brutal breakup of our lives. No one can save us, not even Michael D. He has ruined us for every other president. No matter how many accolades or approvals they earn, they will fall short. They just aren't him. This may well have been the most intoxicating, ultimately toxic partnership we have ever agreed to. So if you hear that cracking noise, that is just the hearts of a nation splitting in two. That is in reference to the impending departure from office of our president. Does it bring a tear to your eye like it brought to mine?"
Well, the unbelievably bad journalism brought a tear to my eye. I mean, look, you shouldn't even have a subscription to the Sunday Independent. I mean, I get that you have to keep an eye on them, but people should, this is not journalism. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable. I don't even have, it's so ridiculous. It's to be, but like it also does show the conformism of Ireland. This is the thing that people like to think. Well, we've broken free from the Catholic Church, which was incredibly conformist and suffocating. Yeah, and done what? Just adopted another form of suffocating conformism.
Am I wrong to think? I mean, I'm reading this line again here because it just jumps every time I read it. It leaps off the page at me. "We forgive all frustrations or misgivings because we believe he loves us unconditionally." I mean, it sounds. Does that not sound explicitly religious to you? Like it is.
Yes. It is. Well, I think that's the point with the play on words.
I don't even know if it was a play on words. I mean, I think that there's a real kind of substitution of progressivism for religion in Ireland that you see it all the time in relation to a whole range of policy areas, and there has been this elevation of Michael D. Higgins as kind of like a secular pope. He's the moral guidance of the nation, and that when he says something, it's almost like he's issuing a papal bull or what's the other thing they do?
He's been elevated though just by people in the Sunday Independent, not by just necessarily ordinary voters.
No, I agree. That is true. But I mean, these are the people who speak for the nation. These are the people who speak for the, I say speak for the nation. Obviously, I mean, they don't literally, but these are the people who dominate the conversation. And it just strikes me that like a piece like that getting published in what was once a very serious newspaper says a lot about, I mean, because it's not just the person who writes the article, right? It's also the sub-editor who reads it. It's the editor to whom it's submitted.
Oh,
it is the publishing process.
I understand you're getting really upset about this. Look, just don't buy the Sunday Independent. Don't give them any money. Why are you, like, don't let my father read the Sunday Independent. He's great. He's very informed. He's also over 80. Why are you getting upset about it? Like, just don't buy it. Nobody under the age of 40 reads the Sunday Independent other than you. So just...
I read it every Sunday for two reasons. The two reasons are David Quinn and Eilish O'Hanlon, both of whom are absolutely superb reporters, and also because I kind of feel like it's somebody who talks about what happens in the country, Laura. I have an obligation to read what other people are saying happens in the country.
Yes, I understand that, and that's why I've got a sub to the Irish Times. Do you think I like reading the Irish Times? No, I don't. I just read it, and I have to pay them to read it. But like, I'm not going to pay like the Guardian and the Sunday Independent and crackerjacks.ie. I mean, you got to draw a line. Just she
know.
wrote what she wrote. The newspaper printed it. Yeah, it's obviously nonsense. I wouldn't be getting too upset about it though.
But why is such nonsense so popular? That's the deeper question.
It's not popular. It's not popular. You
Okay.
just have you done a survey on it? How do you know it's popular? Do you know the amount of clicks?
Look, when
it's
I say
rage
popular,
based, right? You've just played the game they want. You've just done exactly what you wanted them to do, even by taking up my rather precious time talking about it. What's the point in talking about it? You might as well talk about, what my 13-year-old writes on Snapchat. That's about as informed as it is. Yes, it's clearly it's a ridiculous piece.
What your 13-year-old writes on Snapchat is not platformed in national newspapers as a worthy opinion about the head of state. It just isn't. I'm sorry, I've got to push back on you on this one. Because I think it is really important that this stuff be discussed and it be challenged. I think when you publish something like that in a Sunday newspaper, you are saying this is an opinion shared by a substantial portion of the population. I think they're right. I think it is an opinion shared by a substantial portion of the population. And I think the interesting question is, why do a substantial portion of the population regard the president, who's a bit of a moron, as God? What's that about? Why is it tolerated?
Because they agree with his views.
It's beyond that. They agree with lots of people's views.
Okay, well, you tell me.
My theory, for what it's worth, is that it is a displacement. It's displacement religious activity. That we live in a society that's become so atrophied and broken away from what would have been traditional Catholic, Christian, Judeo values, that people are desperately, hungrily seeking around for. I mean, if you see it infused right throughout our politics. It's why Simon Harris cares so much about Gaza. It's why the Taoiseach talks so much about human rights and why they can't fix things like schools and hospitals, right? It is because they are obsessed with providing moral leadership to a population that they sense is hungry for moral pronouncements, but isn't actually hungry to be governed well. And I think it is a national pathology, and I think we have to kind of talk about it. That's my perspective.
When was the last time you went to Mass?
Well,
you're right in that this progressivism is a new form of religion, displacing the old religion. So when was the last time you went to Mass, John?
But this is the thing. I'm not religious, but I'm consistent in my irreligiosity. Right. I don't really embrace gods of any kind, shape, or description. I try to think about the world in a logical and rational way. I have my own biases. I certainly have likes and dislikes that on occasion may not be rational. Just ask some of the listeners what I think about Donald Trump, and they will say that I'm deranged on that topic. But I don't feel the need to look to others for moral guidance.
But other people do look to other people for moral guidance, and sometimes that person is President Higgins. Do I think they're crazy? Yeah, I do. But people are entitled to their views. Did you pen an angry letter to the Sunday Independent?
No, I didn't. I was actually off on Monday, but Ben wrote a piece about this article. This is my first time addressing it. I think it's a tweet, saying it was ridiculous. It was quite popular.
Okay, well, there you go.
I haven't penned my. Do you know I've only written one letter to a newspaper in the last 5 years?
You should pen an angry letter to the Sunday Independent. If you want to push back and save me this hassle.
Okay. All righty. We will move on. Laura's not here for this conversation, so let's move on.
Here. I don't know what you've said at all. Like it's obviously a ridiculous piece, but it's a newspaper. They paid for it. They're entitled to print what they want to print, and people are entitled to read what they want to read. And you run a whole counter platform, which I think is great and fantastic. And that's yeah. I mean, the fact that they would write something like that just shows their hand at how ridiculous they are. They shouldn't be taken seriously. It's sad that people do, but All
right. Well, let's move to perhaps a more meaty topic, one on which there's sort of less ability to discuss whether or not it's actually important at all or not, which is the CSO figures, which were released this week in relation to immigration into Ireland. They were quite compelling, because they showed that there was a 16% overall fall in immigration, which sounded great. That's of course the headline that the media went with. But then when you looked at the detail and the meat of the figures, we had over 100,000 people come into the country last year again. We've had net migration of around about 100,000 people net once you take outflows, inflows, Irish people coming, foreign people coming in, Irish people coming back home, all that sort of stuff. We're now at over 100,000 people coming in last year. In the same week, we had another massive increase in housing prices. And we're now, the CSO estimates 24% of the population of Ireland was born overseas. Now, that is obviously not all related to immigration, because I know some of your own family who are very much Irish were born overseas, but it's still an extraordinary figure, isn't it, to have fully a quarter of the population born overseas.
Well, I think that you have to be careful with numbers, and you have to look at statistics in, you have to be fair. So the piece I have in front of me, it says, okay, so between the 12 months, April 2025, so there were 54,000 new infants born, which is a good thing. 35,000 people died. During the same period, so 125,000 people immigrated to Ireland, a 16% decrease, right? So that's good news that there's a decrease. Now, of those, 31,000 were returning Irish citizens. So you got to take that off, right? You get your calculator out. This wouldn't have been me, but it would have been me the year before. 25,000 were other EU citizens. So most people don't have a problem with other EU citizens. 4,900 were UK citizens. So that's my husband. So you got to take your 31 and your 5,000, because they're very similar culturally, in my opinion. So you got to take, that's 35,000. And 63,000 were citizens of other countries. Okay. We don't know why they were here, if they were working or whatever the case was. And there were 65,000 people went out. Okay, in terms of the quarter of people born abroad, so the Irish citizens are the majority of the population, while the remaining 16% are non-Irish citizens. Hang on, where did you get a quarter from?
This is Matt Tracy's analysis of subsequent figures. I think you're reading the Irish Times article rather than the Gript article.
No, I'm reading the Journal article.
Well, you're hardly you're hardly going to get the journal telling you about the figures of 20.
Well, they said they're non-Irish citizens. Okay, anyway, a quarter. Okay, look, it depends on where the quarter are from. Okay, if it depends. Look, the problem isn't necessarily with immigration, with people coming over and working. I mean, what's really annoying people at the moment are, obviously hotels being taken over and people coming and claiming asylum. So, yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, you have to be careful with the numbers. Look, I think it's a good thing that immigration numbers are down. And as I said, you've got to take off the returning Irish citizens and the UK citizens and probably some of the other EU citizens, because cultural differences are really important.
Look, I agree with you. I stipulate what you're saying, and I mean, I was the one who said, when you talk about a quarter of the population being born overseas, that's a partially misleading figure, because it includes people like, I know some of your children were born in the UK.
All four of my children were born in the UK, so they will be counted. But they're also Irish passport holders.
My mother was born in the UK, for example. So it's not a perfect figure. It's still, I think, an extraordinarily high number. I think even if all of the 24%, of people born outside the state were actually UK citizens, I still think that's an extraordinarily high number for a country to have, of people who are not what one might call natives. And I am not a nativist.
You'd have to compare it to other countries. And I don't know, I'm not being, I'm playing the devil's advocate arguably, but you'd have to compare it to the UK, you'd have to compare it to France. I mean, yeah.
But I know
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but when you put this together with the housing crisis, we had figures out last week showing that Irish house prices are rocketing ahead at record levels. I did some analysis on Gript last week that showed, for example, that if you are a couple on the median income in Ireland, income, which is around, I think, 44,000 euro per year, and you've got two people on that, and you apply the Irish mortgage borrowing rules, which are, I think 4 times your salary, plus you have to have 10% of a deposit, and you see what kind of price can that couple afford to buy a house. They do not get close to the median home, which I think is somewhere around 370,000 now. That's the median, the middle, the home bang in the middle of the market. That's what median means for listeners who might be confused between their means and their medians and their modals. Median is the home right in the middle of the market, and coupled with the income right in the middle of the market, have no hope of achieving the home in the middle of the market. And that is in large part, and you've got David McWilliams coming out this week, and you've got other leading economists coming out this week saying this is partly because we have imported far too many people. And what I object to, you say immigration is down and that's good. What I really object to, this comes back to your problem with me and the Sunday Independent, I guess, is the way that the rest of the media kind of facilitated, quite openly and blatantly facilitated the government in presenting these extraordinarily high immigration figures as a 16% fall and then a successful government policy. I thought it was dishonest journalism.
Okay, well, look, I think you should take the wins when they come. I think the reason why immigration is down is because, it's down from a high, sure, but it is down probably because immigration is now an issue. People can talk about it without being called fascism. A lot of pressure has been put on politicians to get those numbers down, and they're down. So look, my opinion always is, we discussed this before, is you take the wins when they come. Yes, mainstream journalism are going to do what mainstream journalists do, namely, mislead people, okay, and spin for the government. But look, in terms of house pricing, they're going to have to keep getting the immigration numbers down. You could have net zero immigration as far as I'm concerned, and that would be fine by me. Apart from returning Irish citizens, of course, and build more houses. I mean, that's what needs to be done, as well as a decent public transport system.
Let's talk a little bit about the European Convention on Human Rights in this context, because obviously you were saying to me before we came on air that there's a big case in the UK this week in relation to one of these asylum hotels, and there have been leading calls to massive calls in the UK, increasingly from reform, but now also from some of the Tories, I see, to just leave the European Convention on Human Rights, which would have massive implications, by the way, for Northern Ireland, which of course would cause a big stink. But let's park those to one side for a second. Would you disagree with my analysis as a human rights, you're not a human rights lawyer, you are a lawyer. If I was to say to you that, somebody living in Canada or Australia or New Zealand or indeed South Africa, by and large has the same rights as I do, even though they don't live under the European Convention on Human Rights, that the European Convention on Human Rights seems primarily to grant rights to state actors, human rights groups and migrants at the expense of citizens, and that withdrawing from it is sort of a prerequisite for any state, whether it be inside or outside the European Union, that actually wants to tackle the illegal immigration problem with large-scale deportations.
Yeah, look, the UK, to get a hold of their ridiculous, out of control asylum numbers, never mind immigration numbers, are going to have to withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. Okay, I mean, this is just this saying to withdraw 5 years ago was seen as a fringe sort of totally outsider position, and now it's gone completely mainstream. A number of former Labour big hitters have come out saying the UK is going to have to leave the ECHR. Okay, I mean, Jack Straw, David Blunkett, and now Hugo Rifkin, their former foreign secretary. Okay, now, I mean, Irish people might think we don't care, but so it will have big implications for Northern Ireland. And then later, we're recording this in the morning of Friday, and at 2:00, the Court of Appeal are now hearing the appeal in relation to the hotel that has been housing asylum seekers. And the council said successfully won an injunction getting them removed. But what's interesting about that case is essentially the British government has come out and said, no, we side with the asylum seekers. Their human laws or their human rights should trump the rights of the residents in Epping, which is really a similar position that was taken by the Irish government when it came to Coolock and things like that. And the document used, or the rights used, is always the ECHR. That has been used by Network as lawyers in terms of pushing through large scale immigration in the UK and by the government. So it is clear they are going to have to withdraw from that. Otherwise, nothing will change over there. So the question is then, what will be the impact on the Good Friday Agreement and Northern Ireland here. But I mean, I think people say protests don't work. Well, we know that it worked because it worked in Coolock, and it's having a huge impact. As I said, in Epping at least. So we'll just have to see if the court. If the thing is actually, the UK government are screwed either way, because the Court of Appeal say, yeah, we're overturning this and we're siding with the asylum seekers because of the ECHR, then that just creates more pressure to leave. And if they side with the council, well, then you're just going to get councils all over the UK saying, well, we want an injunction stopping our local hotels being used by asylum seekers as well. So
That's the old lose-lose position. Yeah,
I think it's lose-lose for them. Well, the problem is that it'll take a lot of time to withdraw. I mean, Keir Starmer's a human rights lawyer. He himself has used this convention his entire career against the interests of the British citizens. So he's not going to withdraw. It'll have to be a reform government.
Yes, and they will run into trouble, because if that were to happen, of course, we would have the Irish government basically repeating the Brexit playbook, right? Because the Irish government cannot resist. It cannot resist. Irish politicians cannot resist interfering in British politics. They can't, because obviously it is well known, we are the most moral little nation on the planet. Everyone has to listen to us. We are simply better than the Brits. We are better than the Americans. And when the British do stupid things like Brexit, or in this case, leaving the ECHR, the Irish government has to intervene. And so there will be a whole song and dance that I hope Nigel Farage, if he's going to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, which I think he will be, he needs to be thinking now about this whole ECHR Northern Ireland business, because to me it is ludicrous. It's ludicrous because, as I said, I don't have any, I would challenge any human rights lawyer to tell me one human right that I have here in Ireland that somebody living in Australia doesn't have, even though they live under a regime without the European Convention on Human Rights, or a human right that somebody in New Zealand has that I don't, that doesn't have, that I have. It is just this thing they do where they codify your human rights, free speech, liberty, and all the rest of it. And then they add in a whole bunch of other ones that were never rights at all, that essentially trample on your ability to govern your society nominally.
Well, look, all of these are policy decisions. I mean, the problem is that none of this should be decided by the courts. They are all policy decisions, and judges being elites and lawyers being elites, they tend to focus. I mean, the thing is, just as a matter of common sense, it's very difficult, because in court you have if you're representing the asylum seeker, you have an actual person in front of you. Whereas the state, or those who are representing the interests of, Irish people or British people, you have to just rely on the general populace. And a court can always say, well, this individual's human rights must trump just the general population can take the hit, right? Because the risk of pools, say, amongst them. That's the feeling. But the problem is that it's not just one asylum seeker. It's like 100,000 in the last year alone in relation to the UK. So yeah, look, these elites have a certain vision, and their vision is that diversity is everything, and that more people from the most diverse nations in the world can only improve Ireland or the UK. But funnily enough, that never happened in other countries. As I said, if I headed over to Nigeria and demanded the Igbo tribe that I was going to become an Igbo princess, I doubt I'd just be nodded on in.
By the way, if you haven't read Laura's piece on Gript saying I'm becoming an Igbo princess, you should check it out. It was very entertaining, and more to the point, not just entertaining, made a really powerful point, I think.
Yes, I think some people took me literally, but I mean, if you flip these things, you realize how ridiculous their stances are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people did take you literally, because that will always happen.
Yeah, I mean, Farage was asked questions on the European Convention on Human Rights in his press conference, and Northern Ireland's press conference during the week, and I think he just said it can be done. But yeah,
I see that doesn't fill me with confidence. It doesn't fill me with confidence, because and look, I like Nigel Farage as well, much more than the average Irish person does, but I like him a fair bit. But I think it's Boris Johnson-esque to say, "Oh, it can be done. It can be done. It won't be a problem." That's what they said about Northern Ireland, and the Irish government.
Well, they don't.
The
ever
Europeans
really
tied them in pretzels over Northern Ireland during Brexit, when they really didn't have to. It was just British incompetence, to be frank.
Well, they
in my
don't
view.
ever. It's always an afterthought. That's the problem.
Yeah, but they just had this experience, Laura, of going through the Brexit process where the Irish government and the European Union are literally tied them in knots. If they're not thinking that the exact same thing will happen over if they try to withdraw from the ECHR, then their take is pig shit.
Okay,
Like,
well, why don't you email after you've done your angry letter to Sunday Independent, whack off an email there to Nigel Farage and tell him that he's thick as pig shit if he doesn't, anticipate this move from the Irish government.
well, I'll probably be speaking
I don't know
at the
what's
Battle of
wrong.
Ideas. I'll probably be speaking at the Battle of Ideas in London in October, and I will, I'll communicate the message in
Do
whatever
that.
speech
Do
I
that.
give.
Just send him a DM through Twitter. I'm sure he'll be open to it. Tell him how stupid he is. He loves that.
But if he is on this topic, I think it's important to call as you see it. All right, look, let's take a break from politics for a second. Taylor Swift announced her engagement this week. Were you excited for her? And more importantly, do you think it has any cultural relevance?
Yeah, so it probably does. I did say to my daughter when she came down, I think it was yesterday, I saw Taylor Swift got engaged. And she said, yeah, that was announced yesterday, Mom. So sorry. Hi, behind the times. Look, congratulations to Taylor Swift. I thought he got down on one knee. Here, I need some images. Look pretty traditional to me. Best of luck to them. She wasn't married before, was she?
No. That's why I said, because the thing is here, Travis Kelce is like, to me, he was, I was always vaguely aware of Taylor Swift in the background, but obviously I knew a lot about Travis Kelce because I'm an NFL nut. And like, he's an amazing athlete. He's one of the greatest tight ends in history, probably along with Rob Gronkowski, the two most significant tight ends of the last 30 odd years. I can literally hear your
you're boring
falling.
me.
But the point is that he will no longer ever be known as a footballer, will he? He'll either be known as Mr. Taylor Swift or the first Mr. Taylor Swift. Those are the two things that two options.
You've already divorced them.
I'm saying these Hollywood celebrities. It's not unheard of.
Well, they've gone big there on their engagement. Oh, that's a bit staged. Oh, I don't like that. What? Oh, you got? Gee, crikey, that's a lot of flowers. Anyway.
It is. Well, obviously, see, this is the thing as well. It's not spontaneous, is it? You gotta. If you've got all the flowers there ready, you've obviously clearly agreed in advance what the question will be and what the answer will be. So it's not really an engagement as such. The engagement actually happened a couple of weeks earlier where you said, so when will I ask you to marry me? And you weren't told you won't. Do you think, the reason I'm raising this is not so we can gossip about the celebrities. It's I'm wondering, do you think, as some people have written this week, that Taylor Swift getting married will have any meaningful impact on other young women getting married and having babies? Because I've seen some conservatives suggesting that.
Like
I
you.
think it's a bit pot. Well, I wrote about it. I said it can't be a bad thing. It can't be a bad thing. It can't be a bad thing. But I think I've read some other who've gone much further and said, yeah, look, this is going to be brilliant. I think that's a little bit over-interpretation of the culture.
Of course it's a good thing. Someone getting engaged, of course it's a good thing. Will it have an impact? Yeah, I would imagine it'll have an impact. You're keeping marriage in fashion. I'm a millennial Swift. This isn't people. I'm a millennial Swiftie, and I'm going to say Taylor and Travis's engagement felt like a milestone win for our generation. So what's wrong with you? What's your problem?
These people who, it's the whole kind of like living your life vicariously through other people that really bugs me. Just bugs me.
Come on, people like what they like. I don't know since why mine. A lot of things bug you that shouldn't bug you. Anyway, this woman is very happy, was shocked. I was shocked by how emotional the news of the engagement made me. There you go. This is you should write an angry letter to this woman as well, Emily Rella, who was happy. Who was happy that someone else was happy. You should write to her and say, listen here, Emily, stop living your life vicariously through Taylor Swift. Down with this sort of thing. You can ask Father Ted for a sign. I, for one, was shocked by how emotional the news and the engagement made me. As a closet softie. I'm usually able to reel it in. Surely. When big, no, what she's saying is obviously she's not emotional. As a closet softie, I'm usually able to reel it in when big life moments like this happen. I started feeling myself tearing up with joy upon looking at Taylor and Travis's engagement photos before panicking that I was some parasocial fangirl freak. That would be your opinion, right? But then after that path, I found myself thinking, why of all things is this hitting so hard for me right now? Right, well, let's here we go. Should I be reading this out? This is going to explain to you why people are so happy. I'm not going to read out the whole thing. I'm not going to read out the whole thing. Look, I think the point would be, without reading it out and boring the viewers, look, most millennial, because I do follow this, most millennials and a lot of the dating sort of social pieces in the last 10 years, I think there's a very famous one, saying headline, "The Dating Apocalypse." So 90% of the pieces you read are, it's terrible out there. No one ever asks people out for dating. The men are terrible. The women are terrible. It's the end. And I mean, conservatives, say this as well. This is the end is nigh. I'm 32 and I've become comfortable with the idea that maybe it won't happen for me the way it happens in the movies. I've built a beautiful, chaotic life for myself with relationships, blah, blah, blah.
See, the chaotic is the problem.
Wait, hang on.
That's what's not working for you, hon.
Okay, Father Ted. Okay, Norma. Jeez. But as valuable as these lessons have been, they do occasionally feel like puzzle pieces putting together a picture that will eventually be incomplete. You see, it's the same, right? Ultimately, they all want to get married. Despite all the lies they've been fed, they still want to get married. Since I was 13, I've been watching Taylor. Yeah, look, some people have grown up. Some girls have grown up with Taylor Swift, right? They're really invested in her. It's the same as the whole Jennifer Aniston thing, perhaps at my generation. People like their heroes to have a happy ending, and Taylor Swift getting engaged is edging towards that happy ending. By vicariously living through Swift's ups and downs in relationships, we've seen our own experience mirrored in hers, and it's helped us find closure and understanding of her own. Look, I don't know anything about Taylor Swift song, but I know that she's absolutely massive. She's she's the highest paid artist today, isn't she? Yeah?
Yeah, I think she's a self-made billionaire.
Yeah, so she's a self-made billionaire. People are invested in her because she has shared her weaknesses, her emotions, her ups and downs, her dating wins, her dating losses, and then she goes and gets engaged. Yeah, what's not to like about that?
Oh, come on. I share my ups and downs and people don't get emotionally invested in me.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And first of all, you don't, thankfully, and it's different for women. When I think back to why I teared up over the engagement photo of someone I didn't even know on a personal level, I realized what was happening. Blah blah blah, blah blah blah, and then she says how she's written about it. Everything she had dreamed of was real. There it was. There was the tangible proof.
Ah, come on.
What's wrong with you?
Everything she dreamed of was real. I mean, come on. Look, some of this stuff is hysterical. He's a multi-millionaire. She's a billionaire. They live a life with the private jets and the 47 dogs and the going everywhere. And people are projecting like it's some kind of classic love story. I mean, it may well be, but I mean, it's not exactly a model on which to base your life. Maybe I'm.
I don't think she was saying.
Maybe
that.
I am.
Cynicism is not attractive. Okay. Look, I'm not saying I'm tearing up over it, but I can understand somebody who's 20 years younger than me, who has grown up in dating apocalypse, listens to all of her songs, and etc. Is happy that her hero has gotten engaged.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I get that. I'm happy. I remember
will it have an impact on the culture? Yeah, it should have it'll have a good impact, right? It'll have a good impact. My God. What would you prefer if Taylor Swift turned up and said, actually, I'm transgender. Please call me Todd by now and I'm getting shacked up with Morris. What the heck is wrong with you? Oh, it's obviously a big win.
By asking you if you were happy that she got engaged.
I am happy when anyone gets engaged. Okay, I am happy when anyone gets engaged, and I'm definitely happy when a young woman, well, youngish woman, who has a massive influence on other young women gets engaged. Yeah.
Well, look, this is an engaging conversation, so let's take it further because like you talk about the dating apocalypse out there and all the rest of it, and both you and I are of an age where we're past that and all the rest of it. Like, I was reading a piece this week which basically said that after years and years and years of teaching young men about consent and respect for women, it is still the single biggest problem that young women are reporting. Why do you think
Okay.
that is?
I don't know, because porn. Because, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know that it. I genuinely don't know that it is porn. I don't know that it's not porn. I just know that it strikes me that after a decade of kind of like, actually after 2 or 3 decades of the focus being on,
I haven't seen that piece. Where is that piece?
it was sent out in the Gript Slack.
Look, it depends.
I look it up.
Oh, right, okay. Look, it depends on how the questions are asked. You know, people ask leading questions all the time, right? If feminism.co.uk wants to write a piece on men still not understanding consent and this still being the biggest problem in relationships, then they will send out a respected surveyor who will ask the appropriate questions, like, which is the biggest problem on the date, or with men? Their shoes, their lack of timekeeping, or consent. Consent. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if that's a legitimate concern. But yeah,
But you yourself were talking in like, you've read a lot of stuff. I know you've read a lot of stuff because you talked about it in the context of Taylor.
Do the reading.
Yeah, about the dating apocalypse. You've read the horror stories in the United States. It is not just about consent. It's not about getting raped every time you leave the house, thankfully. But it is about like hugely misaligned incentives between men and women, people getting married a lot later, people getting together a lot later. You know, what is your opinion on that? Because you haven't discussed it on the podcast, and you've consumed a lot of material. You've consumed a lot of material on it. No, you have.
What's my opinion on what? Sorry,
I'm being really
slow this morning. The reasons why the young people aren't being aren't dating.
Yes.
They're on their phones all the time. That's number one. They don't like taking risks. Number two. What else? I mean, there's a difference between why aren't they dating, why aren't they getting engaged, why aren't they getting married? I mean, they aren't getting married. I would imagine a huge amount of it is financial problems. They prefer to buy a house first, then getting married, which isn't a crazy idea. But look, you know, people. There's just look. You know, there's obviously a lot more options for young women these days. You know, 50. Well, it's now nearly 70 years ago. This is the thing. People forget you're closer to 2050s than you are the dreaded 1950s now.
Mm-hmm.
But people still go on about the 1950s. I mean, American women in particular used to marry incredibly young, like 21, 22.
Some of them still do. Some of them still, it's falling, but some of them still do. You still come across the odd American couple. I remember when I used to spend a lot of time in the US.
American, yes.
No. Seriously, I remember working with a newly married 21-year-old in the US at one point. I was bowled over. There's still a fair bit more of it about it, I think, than you would think. It's less common in the cities, but outside the cities, I think there's still a lot of that about it.
In South Carolina, yeah, that's probably true.
No.
However, educated middle-class women used to get married in their early 20s a lot more than they did. But I think the post-1950s is probably an exception overall. Look, as I've said, people go to university now. People prioritize their careers. What's happening with well, I mean, look, if you're on Tinder and you always think there's someone better out there, then then people, they think a lot of themselves, you know, as I said, they never put their phones down. It's hard to ask someone out a date if you're on your phone the whole time.
Yeah, it's that dynamic, isn't it? That you've never seen the funniest thing on TikTok, so you've got to keep scrolling, and you've never found the perfect date, so you got to keep swiping. I think look, there's a lot to it. Look, you and I are not going to solve it, but I just think it's probably the single biggest cultural problem of our age in the West, not just in Ireland. It's the one that's causing,
and also as they keep saying, you know, the women these days are, well, the headlines are, you know, the men are so right wing, they're extremists. No, the women now are politically vote incredibly left wing. So not only do the youth, as I like to call them, agree on basic values or political views, but also those basic values and political views actually dominate their lives a lot more than they would have 20 or 30 years ago. So it's much your political views now are much bigger a part of your identity than, say, again, you're kind of too influenced by Americans, but 20 or 30 years ago, it was what town you went to, what high school you went to, who your family were, what church you went to, right? I mean, if you were a Baptist, you want to stay away from those Catholics. They were the dividing lines. But now it's politics. There's a big division between them. Yeah, and as I said, they arguably those kind of views actually dominate too much. And also, look, the other thing is, as I said before, again, in generations gone by, older generations wanted their children to get married. Everything in society, well, most of things in society was sort of orientated towards young people getting together and eventually getting married. But that's not the priority now for parents. The priority is what university they go to, and how much do they earn, and what car are you driving. That's the priority. So that you shouldn't be so whereas if you do read books, and obviously most people don't read books now, you read books, it's everything. The mother is like, time's a ticking, or the aunt would be interfering, Dr. so-and-so's coming over, I expect you to be in my house. And they would organize dinners, and they would bring back the interfering aunts, bring back the interfering grandmothers. They would organize dinners where their daughters would meet the solicitor or the doctor or the farmer or whoever the hell it might be. These things happened.
Yes. I did recently read Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Exactly. And people mock the mother in that, but it was either marriage or homelessness for those 5 girls. So I'm actually on Mrs. Bennett's side. But I mean, that's sort of an extreme example, but I mean, that's England. But everything was orientated towards younger people getting married. Now it's just leave them to it. They'll find their own way. Well, will they? I don't know.
We will see. Listen, before we our last topic, I wanted to circle back because we've done our bit of culture and we've done our Michael D. Higgins and we've done general talk about immigration, but something that really caught people's eyes this week, which I wrote a piece on, which was very popular on Gript. I think it would be popular no matter who wrote it, because I think there was just a lot of hunger to talk about it, which was the tweet sent by Dr. Umar Al Qadri in relation to Dr. Umar Al Qadri, obviously a very prominent member of the Islamic community in Ireland, has been regularly platformed on the media and so on. And he said the following, Laura, in relation to the sexually motivated murder of 17-year-old Lisa in the Netherlands. He said, "The murder of 17-year-old Lisa is heartbreaking and utterly shocking. An asylum seeker has been arrested as a suspect. My prayers go out to her family and all those affected by this tragedy. Although men are the source of violence against women, we must also face a painful reality. People coming from a different cultural context are at greater risk of committing such acts when there is no proper cultural awareness training or integration. Unfortunately, across Europe, including here in Ireland, we see that asylum seekers often receive no meaningful orientation, education, or guidance on societal values, gender equality, and respect for women. Integration is not just about accommodation, but about safety and shared values. We must not ignore these gaps. God forbid something like this happens here. Authorities must view integration and cultural awareness as an essential part of asylum policy that protects both vulnerable people in society and the asylum seekers themselves from isolation or marginalization." Now, a lot of people took what he was saying there to mean, in roughly speaking, that poor 17-year-old Lisa in the Netherlands got murdered because the Dutch government didn't teach some immigrant that it was a bad idea to rape and kill a young girl. Is that your interpretation, or did you think it was an unfair interpretation to what he's saying?
Well, I mean, the Dutch government are clearly responsible, after obviously the primary perpetrator, for thinking that importing people from misogynistic countries is a great idea and a net win. And I have said this over and over again. The feminists are strangely silent on this. Bringing in men from Afghanistan and Iran and all of these places where women are treated like absolute dirt. That's their first problem. And secondly, if you are going to do that, yes, I would have thought the first thing you need to do is tell them that you can't go around raping women. Yeah, yeah. But then the thing is, what would have happened there is if the government had run that, right? If the government had announced, okay, we're going to give, asylum seekers, especially from misogynistic countries, but anywhere, lessons in gender equality and not raping women. There would have been an uproar probably from the feminists. How dare you assume that's what they were going to do? There's plenty of Dutch men that will rape women, or Irish men, or whatever it is. That's what would have happened.
I think it's, yeah, I think, first of all, I agree with everything you've said for the first time on this podcast. Look, there we go. I can agree with everything Laura has said. And not even disagree with it, but I want to add to it, if I may, which is like, it just strikes me that we're living through the most insane cultural experiment in human history. On the one hand, you've got a government, I'm using the example of the Irish government, but they're not alone, that is doling out the taxpayers' money. It's paying out the taxpayers' money to NGOs and lobby groups to say things like sex work is work. To promote a particular culture of sexual access around women, to teach in our schools things like fisting and advanced sexual maneuvers to kids at a young age. Just realized when I said advanced sexual maneuvers, it sounded like there's a beginner level. But the point I'm making is that you are creating, on the one hand, this culture of kind of like, sexual availability. And on the other hand, you're bringing in people from cultures that are highly sexually repressed, that have laws like, for example, the one that exists in Algeria, which says that if you rape a woman, then the one way to avoid going to prison is to marry her to restore her father's honor. You're bringing these people in, and you're ignoring the fact that we talk a lot in this country about how there are economic drivers of migration. People are going for a better life and so on. But people don't talk about the cultural drivers of migration. People don't talk about the fact that a lot of these, repressed countries, people's views of the West are kind of formulated by some kind of toxic combination of CNN and Pornhub, where there are people who are coming here because they believe that women in the West are a particular degree available relative to the women in their home country. And it's an elephant in the room that no one will address. And I don't blame Dr. Al-Khadri for saying what he said, but I do blame governments for engaging in this kind of toxic, mutually contradictory, deliberate culture clash, of which I think the only potential victims can be women in Western countries.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't think I would conflate what the asylum policy should be with the sex education policy. I think you've made a few leaps, whether or not people really are moving from Afghanistan to the Bell Hotel in or Kulak because they've seen something in Pornhub, and they think the women are available. Look, I don't know. You'd have to.
Well, I don't think it's as
serious...
literal as that. I don't think it's literal.
Well, I mean, that's more or less what you said. Look, listen. My view on this is very clear. We have no business importing. We've no business importing asylum seekers or foreign people, particularly men of military age from vastly different cultures, especially misogynistic countries. No business at all. I think it's a disgrace. I think any woman who is sexually assaulted or worse, or their family, but by one of these people, should sue the government under, ironically, the ECHR as an attack on their because you have a duty to protect the bodily integrity of your women in that particular country. They have no business doing it. They've never explained to us why that is a good thing, what benefit that is to Ireland. And I think I saw something come up on Twitter or something, and you always get the presenter, oh well, what about the refugee from Afghanistan? Why didn't you tell them when they're coming off the small boats? Look, it's not our problem. It's simply not our problem. You file that under not my problem. Okay? what's happening in Afghanistan is absolutely terrible for the women there. You can certainly try and start putting pressure on. I notice no one cares about what's happening in Afghanistan, by the way. For some reason, that's just fallen off the international radar. But we have no moral obligation to import these people from Afghanistan. You have a moral obligation to your own sister, your own daughter, your own cousin, or whoever it is, not to increase the risk that she's already subjected to. And I've said it before, I'll say it again for the feminists who say, oh, well, we've got loads of rapists and Irish men are rapists and sexual abusers and etc. etc. Yeah, exactly, they are. But we're stuck with them. You can't deport them. Okay, because they're Irish citizens. You can't strip them of their passport and make them status, unfortunately. As I said, I'd ship them to China. So yes, we have enough of our own. We do not need to import any. There is no net benefit to Ireland economically, and there's certainly no net benefits to it culturally. It shouldn't even get to the re-education, please sir, don't rape my sister bit. It shouldn't get to that part, because they shouldn't be here in the first place. It's quite simple. Right. It's not difficult.
No, I cut you off there because that's going to be like your little spiel there will be the short clip of the podcast that goes out in social media. So I just need to be short enough. So I'm just going to cut you off there. And I also, because we're running towards the end, I wanted to ask you briefly about the other immigration story of the week. And we've been very heavy on immigration this week, but I think it's justified because it's been a lot of in the news. The government is obviously taking 52 people from the Gaza Strip. It is bringing them to Ireland. It is putting them up. It is paying for their university accommodation. It is paying for their university fees. It is paying for their travel and their cost to Ireland. And they're staying here for the next 4 years to study in Irish universities. Do you think that is a good use of your taxpayer money? And are you happy with it?
Well,
sorry, it's a very loaded question.
It's 52 people from Gaza. Yeah, bring them here, educate them, and then they can go back and free Gaza from Hamas terrorists. Hopefully, that's what they'll learn. The much more important immigration story is the Asian hornet nest discovered in Cork City.
Oh yeah, you've got a big problem with the old Asian hornets, don't you?
Absolutely.
Elaborate on that.
Absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I tell you, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. An Asian hornet was I think spotted in Cork. At first, they didn't think there was a nest, but they have found the nest. And I tell you, people are quick to, especially people like you, to criticize the government agencies. The National Park and Wildlife Service have done an excellent job in and whoever else was involved in locating this nest, destroying these nests, because I can tell you, hornets will wipe out all the native bee populations, butterflies, everything. I saw a whole clip once on YouTube about a single hornet destroyed an entire bee's nest. Everybody should have bee-friendly gardens if possible. It's a huge problem. So anybody who's been involved in that, as I said, they've done a great job in trying to if you see what's called, I think, a foreign species, you can report it to the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and they will hop to it and get rid of them. Hornets, terrifying, absolutely terrifying.
Well, not only, I mean, we've done I'm very proud of the work we've done down here at the McGurk Shack, in kind of making the whole place more bee friendly over the last 7 or 8 years since we've lived here.
Yes, you do not need a vast, just to the viewers, that you do not need a vast compound like the McGurks have. You can make your small apartment bee friendly with, if you have a balcony, you get the lavender out there, you get your foxgloves out there. If you've got a small garden like us city folk do, you can make it bee friendly. Bees are our friends. Without bees there are no food, and hornets are terrifying, and of all the immigrants, the Asian hornet is the worst.
My fear would be that when you find the Asian hornet nest, that's because there's more than one, because they're reputedly quite hard to find. I know up in Seattle it's not quite the same thing because it's been a Japanese variant of the hornet they have there, but they've been fighting these invaders for quite a while.
Well, this is why if you spot one, you get on the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and they will get rid of it.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing, by the way. If you are listening to this, and for some reason you do come into a encounter with one, don't just kill it and throw it. You've got to catch it. And you've got to keep it for them to identify it.
Oh no, you couldn't go near it. Oh my God. Oh gosh, no. You must just report it, I think. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, look, that is a good note to end the podcast on. Unless, did you have anything else that you want to discuss, Laura?
No, I didn't.
No, you okay. All right. Well, look, it's been a pleasure. Mostly a pleasure chatting to you this week as ever. And
don't be cynical
very
about love. It's sad. It's not attractive.
Oh, I'm very uncynical about love. Look, I will hopefully chat to you again soon on this podcast, but I hope you won't be offended if I say that I hope Sarah is feeling better. And
No,
is
of
back with
course,
us next week.
absolutely. Yeah.
But in the meantime, thank you to the listeners for putting up with us as you always do. Thank you for your comments, which we always read, even the mean ones. Although last week most
I
of them
love the mean ones.
Yeah, you like the mean ones when they're about me, don't you?
Although there are a fair few about me now. Oh yeah.
Well, we look forward to reading more of them, and we'll see you next week. So I've been John. She has been Laura. This has been The Week That Really Was, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.